Yes, amazing. So if anyone doesn't feel comfortable, feel free to also turn off your camera. And yes, welcome to this workshop. We are very excited. Well, for I think Ruben and Manuel to really explain you and give you some fundamentals for these different topics. So as a reminder, Her Hack is really an initiative that wants to empower women in tech. And for this, we organize a series of events, regional events, upskilling workshop as tonight, and a 2-day hackathon. And for this, it will be on the 1st and 2nd of November. And if you're not registered, feel free to go on our website or even scan this QR code. It's really open to everyone, even participants with no prior tech background. So yes, and you will see it's very fun. It's really all about thinking, designing, prototyping. So it will really be like in a very safe and well-being environment. So yeah, just feel free to join. And if you have any questions, Kevin and I, so in this chat, but you will also receive an email from us, are happy to support you if you have any concerns or any doubts. So feel free to reach out to us. And now I give back the word to Ruben and Manuel. Have fun tonight, and I hope you will enjoy this session.
Thank you very much, Astrid. Beautiful. So I can leave this for a few more 4 seconds for the QR code if you want to get information from there. And I like the dare to join because seriously, this hackathon is a great experience. There is definitely there is no way that you can feel that you cannot collaborate. It's very friendly as well, and we are always going to try to do something better, right? I think it's for sustainability. Okay, right, Astrid? Topics.
Yes,
So
exactly.
this is going to be very interesting topics too that we're going to try to find some solutions there. Great. So I go to the next slide. All right, who are we? I would like to introduce you to Manuel Winkler. He is one of our instructors. If you want to give a little bit of some words, Manuel.
Yeah, I'll have a slide. I'll tell you a bit more about
Okay.
my story.
Okay, great. So we are part of the Contractor Academy. If you don't know about us yet, we offer immersive bootcamp programs related to IT. Specific for our concern, we're part of the full stack program, and we're covering front end, back end, DevOps, and in a 12-week in very intensive program. These are courses that are for individuals looking for their careers, or if you want to just skill up as well, and companies, right? We also offer programs for companies that are also tailored for their needs. We are about 8 years, I think 8 years. We started in Zurich in Switzerland. Then we have present in Munich, Bremen, and we all now offer a remote only, and also all the programs are hybrid anyways. So some numbers: we have 1,200 and more graduates. We oversaw about more than 200 projects, and I think that is only counting for one of the programs. I would say even like with data science, we have more than that. And we have definitely more than 50 instructors working with us. A little more details about our programs. We offer the main programs are full stack development and data science. In the full stack development, we have the goal to build platforms in a sense, not only presentational websites, but also fully fledged platforms. We have 2 formats in the full-time and also part-time. And then we're gonna cover front-end with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React as well. And we're gonna also go to the back-end part with Django, Python, everything with the version control using GitLab, Dockerizing with Docker to deploy. So all the development life is gonna be just in 12 weeks, and it's very, very intense. Also, we offer programs in the data science part, to learn the techniques and technologies for processing real world data. Is as well 12 weeks in the full time and 22 weeks in the part time. The technologies, we go from machine learning, natural language processing, Python, deep learning, visualization, and SQL. Good. We also offer short courses in Python that only lasts 6 weeks. And also, that is new one is the Master in Generative AI, which has a really, really good demand. All right, let's make it short and sweet. This is what is gonna happen today is we're gonna cover HTML and CSS fundamentals with Manuel. The idea is that we can get a grasp of the basics and how to start also faster and quickly for the prototyping, right? Since we're going to do we're gonna participate in a hackathon, the idea is that you have the fundamentals to start as fast as possible. Okay, great. We're gonna cover HTML, CSS, positioning, layout, Flexbox, and CSS Grid as much as possible. Of course, we would like to be here like 10 hours, but it's gonna be limited time, and we're gonna try to cover as much as we can, right? And you are also welcome to ask any questions, and then we're gonna move forward with that. Just a little bit of information what is coming for Hair Hack in our programs. We offer a free event in prompt engineering that is tomorrow, actually, at 8:15 in the morning. And the next event for Hair Hack is 22 October from 5 to 7:30 to rapid prototyping with Figma and UX UI design, very, very crucial. And 24 October pitching techniques. Okay, we really hope that you learned something new today. They're very happy, and we also have an offer for you that you have the promo code. So if you can take a picture or a screenshot right now, is the right time to do it. And it's time. Let's go. The floor is yours, Manuel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will start sharing my screen. Yes, and I will share my screen number 1. Yes. Oh. Hello, everyone. Welcome from my side. A little word about myself, so you know who you're going to be listening to for the next 90 more or less minutes. I am Manuel Winkler. I am Swiss, and before I got into IT and coding, I worked at the Kantonspolizei Bern as a police officer for 3 years. And then I did the Quereinsteiger, I did the switch, and I'm very happy I did, and I was very surprised at how well everything worked out. I did the boot camp at the Constructor Academy a few years ago, the full stack coding one. And a few months later, I got the chance to start working as a full-time web developer at a web agency in Biel. I have gotten the chance to teach a few times for Constructor Academy, and I get to teach the courses that I myself took a few years ago, which is quite interesting. I'm a volleyball and skiing enthusiast, so when I'm not coding, I'm going to be on the slopes. And you've heard about the agenda, or a quick word about how we want to go ahead and tackle a project like this: HTML, CSS, and positioning our elements. Little commercial again. I'm going to get right into it. What I have open right here is Visual Studio Code. If you've tried a little bit of coding, you've probably ventured into Visual Studio Code. It's the most often used open source and free to use IDE So it's an integrated development environment. And you're actually supporting a somewhat Swiss product when you're using Visual Studio Code, which I think is pretty cool. So it's supported and somewhat maintained by Microsoft. But the team that takes care of Visual Studio Code is situated close to Zurich. It's pretty cool. Everyone around the world uses it, and it's a little bit Swiss. So I'm using Visual Studio Code. If you want to do what I do, you can use any IDE you want, any editor. You could even use a text editor or code in Word. It's all going to work. But VS Code has been very proven, very easy to navigate. I'm going to move to the next topic, which is HTML. And HTML is another thing that has its roots in Switzerland. It wasn't a Swiss person that came up with it, but it was invented at the CERN. So he was working for the CERN in Lausanne. And this was early 90s. The internet had already been a thing for a little while. That came from the US, DARPA, defense program, and then universities exchanging information. But there wasn't yet a standardized protocol of how we want to move information back and forth. And someone felt like, okay, it might be good if we standardize this and make up some rules. It didn't really matter much what those rules were, but the fact that he came up with a standardized set of how we pass information from one client or server to another is still the reason why we use this today. So HTML was changed a few times over the years. The most recent big change happened in 2014, which is when HTML5 was born, and that's still the version that we use today. There were some minor changes, but we still use HTML5 from 10 years ago, which was invented more than 30 years ago. And I find it pretty cool that this old technology is still the backbone of all internet protocols and all internet exchanges. So let's see how we can see our HTML, because currently I did write some things in my file. If you want to get started, what you can do is you can create a new file. I named mine index.html. And Visual Studio Code is going to create an HTML file for you. Just so that we are all talking about the same thing, this is just a way to view my files. They're not stored in Visual Studio Code. They're going to be stored on your machine in some folder. And this is where it is, for example. Mine is called template. And this is the folder that I have open in Visual Studio Code. So whatever code we write in here, it's similar to when you write into a Word file or when you change a PowerPoint presentation, it's going to be saved on your local machine. And this is just how we access it. Now, if I want to see what I actually created here, I can click on this live server extension that I have. If you don't have that in your Visual Studio Code, you can go to extensions, and there are some nifty little features here that can help you highlight special syntax of a coding language or display what you created in your browser locally. And what I have here is called the live server extension. It is close to being the most often used extension on VS Code, and it might already be installed for you. So this is telling me that whatever I created is now running on port 5500. If I open this in a browser, this is me, this is myself, this is my local machine. And then I can access port 5500. And the file that I access is the index.html file, which is good, right? That's what we have here. And we can see it's not pretty yet, but whatever I wrote on my file is displayed in my browser. I'm using Brave. You can use Chrome or Safari or Firefox, whatever you want. But we can see what we created in our file in our browser now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to have my browser window be a bit smaller so that we can see both what we're working on and what it looks like in the end. Let's see. So when I change something in here, hello world, and I refresh my browser, let's see, yes, Awesome. Live reload's not possible without a head or body tag. Oh, that's nice. So Visual Studio Code is already giving me some suggestions of what I might want to do. And it's telling me that I'm missing a head or body tag. It's a good start to get into the base structure of our HTML file. Let's see, I'm going to remove this. I'm just going to leave the hello world, which is what a lot of people use to first, yes, display something on their websites or in their consoles. So my problem is that I don't yet have a clean structure in my HTML file. And one of the fastest ways in Visual Studio Code to get this going is with this little nifty hack. If I just type an exclamation mark and hit enter, I'm going to be presented with this beautiful base structure of my HTML file. As a rule, this hasn't changed in the last 30 years. My HTML file needs to have an opening and closing tag. It needs to have a document declaration to tell the browser what type of file it should expect from us. And what we're telling the browser is that we have an HTML file. We then have HTML opening and closing tags, as you can see here. And everything that we do in this file that is HTML, we're going to write inside of these tags. In our HTML tag, what we can do is we can tell the browser what language it should expect. So we might have the same file in German and in English and in French, especially in Switzerland. This is a big topic. In our case, let's stick with English so that it knows what to expect from us. And what we have here is we have a head tag and a body tag. Now, before it said that we're missing these two, a head and a body tag. Let's see, HTML5 is awesome. And I save my file. Let's see, I might need to turn off my live server extension and turn it back on. Now, if I type something more like an exclamation mark, yes. So without having to refresh my browser, I'm now going to see all of my changes directly in there. Let's talk about what the head and the body tags are for. So the head information inside of the head tags, we're going to add all the information that is not going to be displayed directly on the website, but it's meta information about our website or about our page, about our file. So as you can see, one of the standard ones is the UTF. It's what kind of characters we're using, what symbols. There's some information about the viewport, you know, what we expect, what space we expect our file to occupy. We have a title, which it sounds pretty important, right? You might have already come across this. It says document up here. It says document here. So I have this little theory that I could change this to per hack and save. And you can see in our browser, our tab is going to be called her hack. So it's information that won't be directly on the page, but it's more about our website. There can be additional things here. You can link JavaScript files to make our website, you know, perform some logic, some features. We can link to style sheets for styling, which we're going to do later. And then there's a whole ton of information you can put in here eventually that will benefit your SEO, so your search engine optimization. Big search engines, like I'm going to say it, Google, what they're going to do, they're going to look at your head and they're going to use it to classify what website or what application you are. And the more accurate information you put in here, like a description about what you do, a description of what services you offer, some meta information for Google's crawlers, they're going to read these out. The more accurately you're going to be ranked and listed in the big search engines results. So the head tag, very important, maybe more towards the end of a project or to fine-tune things. We're going to be working in the HTML5 is awesome part of our file, which is the body. The body is where we're going to put all visual and content that we're going to see on our website. As you see, it's displayed, and hello world. I save and it's displayed as well. So everything that we want to display, we can add in here. I'm going to check the chat to see if there are some questions. right now.
Yeah, I'm taking care of the questions actually.
You're taking care of questions. Awesome. Thank you. Then I'll just keep talking. If you want me to do something, Ruben, you just tell me, right? Okay.
All is good. Thanks.
Or yeah, just forward it to me. Thanks. So let's see what we can put inside of our body tag. Right now, as you can see, I put some line breaks in here, but our line breaks aren't being displayed by the browser. Apparently, it's just concatenating, it's adding all of the information together and displaying it on one line. Not a huge fan of that. So let's see what we can do and what we really should do inside of our body tags. What we are going to use are so-called tags. These tags, same as the head or the body or the HTML tags, oftentimes, well, most of them have an opening and a closing tag. You can see the difference. The opening tag is just these little tags, and then the closing one has a slash inside of it. And everything that we do inside of our HTML file is going to be revolving around these opening and closing tags. And if you can already recognize a certain hierarchy, it's like an ancestral tree. You know, you have parents and grandparents and grand-grandparents and children, and you can see that we have some higher level tags like the body tag, and then inside of it, we have this H1 tag, and then maybe there's going to be something inside of this H1 tag. So for example, we could have strong inside of here. Well, it already is. Or we could have a little, oh, what I'm going to do is there you go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a div. Div stands for like a divisor. So we can use this as a container so that we can structure our code and our HTML inside of different containers. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add my nice H1 title in here. And then I might have another div into which I will put some H. Let's make it H2. And this is going to be our hello world. And we're going to have multiple H2s. So as you can see, we have a body tag that has a child, which is a div, so one of the containers. And then we have another child, which is the H1. The H1 is the title on our page. These divs are siblings, right? They're on the same level. And that's why it always helps if we have this indentation, it's called, and really stick to it visually, because then it's easier to read like which ones are siblings, which ones are children. And these tags are children of the div. These two, again, are sibling. So you can recognize this whole hierarchy going throughout our entire document. And what we need to do if we want our syntax to be correct is we need to make sure that these opening tags have closing tags and that the hierarchy is correct. Because, for example, if I take my div here and move it, let's say, in here, this wouldn't work very well, and there is going to be problems with what's displayed on our page if we, yes, so the div is opening, and then we have something that doesn't have a closing tag, but we're closing it early. So make sure that the order of these opening and then closing ones is always correct.
Manuel,
Yes.
can you show again the live server plugin? Like
Yes.
the port 5, you know, because
Yes.
yeah, that's it, mostly the question, how it's getting rendered already in the browser.
Yes. So it's always a lot more fun if you see something in your browser, right? So in Visual Studio Code, up here we have our files. Then we can search things. We have some tools for debugging. And then under extensions, if you type live or live and wait for a little while, yes, there's going to be an extension called Live Server, which if you want to, there's a few different ones. If you want to make sure you have the right one, you can click on it. It should look like this. It's called Live Server, and it has 55 million downloads. So it seems to be pretty popular. And if you click install on this, what you're going to get is you're going to get this little button here that's going to say go live. Okay. So if I don't have this turned on right now, it says go live, then my browser, at port 5500 isn't being fed anything. So if you click on this, it's even nice enough to open your default browser for you at the correct port, and then you should be able to see something here. By the way, you need to make sure that when you type something in here, like, am I closing H2 tag? Yes. You need to save the changes to your file. So you can either hit Command 0 or Command S or Control S if you're on a Windows machine, or you can go here and click Save, which is quite tedious. What you can do is you can click on Autosave in your file and then Autosave. And what that's going to do is every time that you stop typing something for like half a second or maybe a second, depending on your settings, your file is going to save automatically, which is going to make displaying things in your browser a lot easier and a lot faster. So if I type something here, hello, I type, and then I stop typing, about a second later, it appears in your browser. If you open up a second project with the Live Server extension, it's going to display it on 5501 and then 5502. So you have these different ports at which you can access your file. Also, another little thing. So I name my file index.html, which if we look at what's in my browser, yes. So there's two ways that you can access this file. What the Live Server extension does is it's going to provide whichever folder is currently open in Visual Studio Code, it's going to provide that to the browser. And if you name your file index.html, this is like a convention that your browser will, if it's not provided with a certain path, like the home page.html, for example, if I do this, it's going to look for a file called homepage.html. We can try that if you want, because I remember having to figure this one out. So let's name it home and then HTML. And in here, let's put a very simple, quick H1 called home. By the way, HTML is not caps sensitive, so this would work, but it looks a bit weird. So let's have our home. And what we can try now is we can look for home.html. Yes. I am home. Yes. As you can see, if we look for home.html, it's going to go into this folder and it will look for this one specific file. I can already use my back button in my browser. It's already treating us like a real website. And I can go back to index, which I can find it by saying index.html. This will work, but because of this convention that this is the default name of your main HTML, the root of your project, we don't have to add that name and we can just go to the port and it will find it. Awesome. I hope that's enough for the Live Server extension. Let's talk a bit more about the tags that we're using. So I did mention that I'm using an H1 and multiple H2 tags. These are called headings, and there are multiple headings. We can also slap in a little H6. There's 6 default headings in HTML. I am the lowest heading. Okay, as you can see, this is the smallest one. These headings, it can be a little bit confusing maybe in the beginning. They don't exactly correlate to font size or whether something is bold or not. They are more like if you're using Word, you're going to also have your headings that you can use if you often if you have like a title or a subtitle and you want those all to have the same rules applied to them, it often, what you're going to do is before you start a project, you're going to say all of my H2s are going to be like this. All of my H3s are going to be like this. So it's a way of having a nice design over your entire project. And then you want to stick to this. You don't have to do this. What you could do is you could just use a P tag, for example. It's a very often used tag. P stands for paragraph. So if I use P, my HTML5 is awesome. It's going to look like this. And what I could do is I could either just say that this should be B for bold. You can see this is not something that we usually do. So let's see if the B works. Yes. So using the B just made my text bold. So it's fat, right? Which is similar to when I'm using headings. Or I could also say I want this to have a certain font size with the style attribute. And then I can say font size. Let's say the font size is 20 pixels. That's a bit small. Let's make it 40 pixels. Yes. So I have a very similar, also bold and very big title right now. And I made it by using a P tag, some styling, and a B tag. But if I go back to my home page, for example, and I also want this to look the exact same as I want this one to look, I'm going to have to copy all of this and also give it a certain font, which is somewhat tedious, right? And that's what these H1s and H2s are for. If I have one H1 and then style all of these in a certain way, it's going to be a lot easier to reuse this logic and to reuse this styling. A little notice about my H1. The H1 is supposed to be the big fat title on your website or on your application. And what you want to do is you only want to use one of them per page. You could use multiple. There's nothing preventing you in HTML's syntax proof. So when it's being checked, it's going to display multiple of them. But for your search engine optimization, for example, so for Google, for example, ranking your website, it's better if you stick to some core principles. You can read those, look them up online. And one of them is having only one H1. It's a visual thing where you don't want to have too many titles. You don't want everything to be important and like the main thing on your website. You're supposed to just have one. So much for headings. Let's see what else we can use. I'm going to get rid of the H6. And what I'm going to use here is I'm going to write a little text. I'm going to go back to the P tag also. Lorem generator. If you've seen placeholder text in web development, you've probably come across lorem ipsum. It's one of the texts that we use if we just need random text on a website, and we can use this. Let's see. Okay, we have this beautiful text. And what we can do with our P tags is if we have multiple of them, it's gonna, per default, create a line break between them. So I am also a paragraph. As you can see, we have a paragraph and then there's a line break per default, and then we can have as many paragraphs as we want. If we want to force line breaks, for example, you could force a line break inside of a P tag. So if we feel like our lorem ipsum, the first one, is a bit too much, what we could do is we could go to a certain point, maybe where one of the sentences is finished. Yes, here. And we could, oh, by the way, changing, we've seen this before, changing how this is styled inside of my editor does not change anything about how it is being structured here on our browser, right? So the line breaks that I add here by hitting enter, they're being ignored when this is finally compiled. There we go. I can do this because it's a bit prettier, right? Visually, this is a bit easier to read in my editor, but it's not going to translate to what we see in our browser. If I want there to be actual line breaks here, I could, for example, use the BR tag, which stands for break, which is going to create this line break right here. As you can see, this tag is a bit different from the others we've used before. The others have all had an opening and a closing tag, with the slash being only in the second one. There are some self-closing elements in HTML, which the break is one of them. What we do is we add the slash at the end of the opening tag, which is also closing itself. So we can slap these bad boys around wherever we want. For example, here, and then we have a bunch of breaks wherever we need them. There are other self-closing tags, and one of the more interesting ones would be the image tag. Let's go to, yes, let's stay above our paragraph right here and add an image tag. And see how we can get an image onto our website. What we can do is we can find an image that we like. So we can have images from remote sources, like another website, or maybe there's a database somewhere that you want to access with images. What I could do is look for a bear image. Yeah, this one's cute. That's, well, iStock. I don't want to have to get a license, but we should be fine with this one. Let's see where the picture is. All right. Yes, I am a real human. Oh, this looks super pretty. Let's see where they have this. Okay. Let's see if we can. Let's try another one. Let's try the images. Yes. So let's see where this one is hosted. Put in on tab open. So I open only the picture, and I want to get the absolute path of this one picture. And let's see if we can't put that inside of the src attribute of our image. Oh, that's a long URL. And let's see what we have on our page. Very cool. So very little effort to add an image to our website from an external source. Give me just a second. Sorry. So we have an external image that we use for our website, which is going to work if we have our entire address in here. And what we can also do, there's some advantages with this, right? We don't have to have the image be part of our website or of our project, which is going to save us some data that we don't have to store. The disadvantage is that we're dependent on wherever this image is being hosted, right? So if Wikipedia changes this image, our website is also going to be affected by that change. So what we can do is we can have our own images in here, and we can access those by not giving this a absolute path, which, for example, is a URL of an image. But what we can do is do this. We can have an img, which is self-closing, and the source that we add is the relative path. So we're starting where we are right now. So in this folder, in the root of the folder, and I made a folder called images with some images inside of it, and we can say images. And then the autocomplete is very nice. It's very handy. It's already helping me to tell me what images I have available. I'm going to go with Con Air. I'm a big Nicolas Cage fan. I like this guy, or we could have a little cup. I like the Mona Lisa pillow. That's probably the better one. So let's go with the Mona Lisa. And we have an image in our page. This is local, so I have to have it inside of my project. And remember, this isn't some magical place. This is a place on my machine. So I have this in here, and then I have a folder called images, and then I have some folders in here, some images in here. And we can access these. I have mentioned the source attribute, but I haven't exactly been speaking about attributes yet. So let me get into those. Attributes are certain characteristics of your elements. So we can have a p tag and a p element, and then we have an h2 tag, which creates this h2 element, and all of these can have attributes. And the source attribute for an image is just the default place where we add where the image comes from. There are other attributes that we can use. For example, an image has something called alt. The alt stands for alternate or alternative. And what it does is if this image is not available, the alt text will be displayed. So I can say Nick Cage Mona Lisa pillow. And if this image is not available anymore, for example, let's break this on purpose. I'm going to rename this to Mona Lisa. And now that we're having trouble displaying this image, the Nick Cage Mona Lisa pillow text is being displayed. So the alt, it's easy to not write alts, or it's easy to forget. If you're a little bit lazier on the faster side, you might not want to write them because you have this beautiful image, right? But it's pretty important that you add them. There's multiple reasons for it, not only if the image isn't found, but this is also important for screen readers or crawlers. So Google or search engines looking over your page are going to have a better idea of what you're displaying on this page if you have a good text describing it. Another thing is accessibility. We want to make our websites available for everyone. And people that have a hard time seeing, they might use screen readers. So they might have something reading the content of a website to them. And if they can't see your picture, they're at least going to be able to hear what the picture would display to them. So it's also very good for visually impaired customers. Another attribute that we can use, and because we're getting a bit long with the attributes right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to indent it like this. You can do that. You don't have to. Another one that I've briefly shown before is the style attribute, which we can use to add some styling to our element. One thing that I could do is give it a certain width. Let's say it's 100 pixels or 150 wide. And let me change this path to Mona Lisa so that it works again. Okay, so our image got a little bit smaller, and I'm telling it that it should have a width of 150 pixels. If you feel like, wait, how do I know if this really is 150? How do I know that this works, right? I mean, you could just change this to 250. It's getting bigger, so I feel like I'm on the right track. But we don't want to be working blindly. And what we can use for a lot of the changes that we made is we can use our browser's developer tools, which have some different options. We have the console, some networking, performance, right? But what we can also do is we can inspect our elements. So I'm on the Elements tab here. And then by selecting this little selector cursor, what I can do is I can hover my item and I can already see here, okay, great. It has 150 times 145, all right. If I click on it, I can see that, okay, apparently the style attribute, so element.style, has this width. I can even turn it on or off to see what happens. And here I have a complete list of all the styles that are currently being applied to my element. Some of these are going to be the ones that I give it, but oftentimes there's some styling that just is being given by the browser as a default. So apparently to all images, my browser gives overflow X clip, overflow Y clip, certain display, inline, interesting. And then here is the one that I gave it, it's the width. So by using these developer tools, you can inspect your elements and see if it has the expected behavior of what you gave it to be. This is different from browser to browser. You might need to go to, it's probably best if you search for it. This is a Chromium-based browser. You might need to turn, I know that in Safari, you need to turn them on before you can actually right-click to open it. But you can Google that for your preferred browser. So what happens if I give my image a height of, let's say, 300 pixels? Well, if I'm forcing it to have a certain width and a height, it might get distorted, right? Because I'm telling it this is what you are now. So if I give it both, you should check. I think it was 145, right? Okay, this is more or less what I want. Realistically, what we're going to do is we're going to only restrict one of them, either the width or the height. Both is going to work. Let's give it a height, but no width. And then what it's going to do is it's going to maintain its own aspect ratio and automatically generate the other one that we don't give it. So if I inspect it again, it now has a height of 160. And depending on the aspect ratio, its width is automatically calculated. Awesome. So let's see how we can position some elements. Let's first talk about where we add our styling. I'm going to add a little bit of styling to our text. Yes. Let's change what our H1 looks like. I'm going to also add the style attribute, and we can talk about how we want this to look. So let me give my style a text. Let's give it a color of blue. Okay, awesome. So apparently I can change what things look like with the style attribute. And let me try to give it a background color of the white. Looks a little too white. Let's give it a beige background color. All right. I think we're going to move to CSS because what I'm doing right now, the inline style, it works and it can be done, and it was the way to go up until CSS became a thing. But you might already hear from me that I'm being slightly uncomfortable with writing too much styling in here inside of my tags. And that's because it's not really what we do anymore or how things are being done anymore. So this is how styling started out. You would have an element and then style the element directly where it is, right? You can change its color, its background, whether it has a border, well, how big it is, how much space it occupies, where it's supposed to go in regards to its siblings or its parents. All of these things we can change. But if we add the content of these elements in here and all of its styling, it can be a bit convoluted or a bit too verbose or hard to read or hard to change. So this is where CSS comes in and CSS style sheets. instead of adding our styling right here in the element, what we can do is we can abstract this and add it to a different file. I created a file called styles.css. You might have different ones of these. They can have different names. Styles is just one of the default names for it. And what I can do is I can link in my HTML file, in the head of the file. Let's go right here. I can link to this style sheet by using the link tag. Let's see if we can't have this be self-closing. Yes. And what this takes is a rel attribute. It's a style sheet. And we're going to tell it where it is. It has an href of styles.css. So I'm telling it where it is, similar to how I gave it the path to the image. And I'm telling it what it is. It's a style sheet. Let's see if I can't change what this h1 looks like inside of this file. So I'm going to say h1, have these curly brackets, and inside of these, I'm going to say color. Let's take something a little bit prettier, cadet blue. Okay, let's see. Let's get rid of this one. And we have our cadet blue as the text color. So I have this CSS file. I'm telling the h1 what color it's supposed to have. And because I'm importing this style sheet, it's being applied to all the elements that I have on my page below it. If you saw correctly, when I had this in here, the color blue, it's blue, even though I'm telling it to be green at the same time, right? So apparently there has to be some way of deciding which one of these rules is winning over the other one, which one takes precedent. And the order of how that works is that when I write styling directly into the element, that is the strongest, that's the most specific way that I can do styling. And it's always going to win over this right here, because this is a bit more further removed from the actual element. So this is going to lose versus inline styling, which is stronger. There is one little trick that I can use if I want to beat the blue. So I want both of them to be there, but I want it to be green, is I can use the important annotation, an exclamation mark, and then the word important. And that what that's going to do is it's going to overwrite, it's going to overrule which one is stronger. We try not to use this in production or when we have the actual website. It's more of a thing that you can use in debugging. So when you want to just try something quickly, you want to just see what the green would look like, or if something doesn't work the way you want it to exactly, you can use the important to overwrite this rule. Ideally, you remove it after. Because what happens is if you add this important, and then maybe you yourself in the future or one of your fellow developer friends changes the code and adds important here also, now the blue is winning again, right? Because they are both important, so they climb to the same space, but the blue is inline styling, so it's going to win, right? And you don't want to have everything be important or at the very top of this hierarchy. So maybe don't use important in your project when it's running. So let's go back to having the cadet blue, and I'm going to remove it from this inline style right here. I'm going to steal the background. I'm going to leave the background color in here because then we can see after we're done how we did things differently. There are other ways that I can style things. What I did right here is I used an element selector. So what I did is I'm saying that all of my H1s should have this style applied to them. I'm also going to add the background color. What was it? Beige, right? I'll add it just to be sure. Okay. So all of my H1s are going to look like this. So if I were to have another H1 on my page, maybe down here, yeah, I can add one in here right away. We said we don't want to do that, right? We don't want to have multiple H1s. I'm an illegal H1. Okay. So even though I'm not applying any styling to this, let's get rid of the styling in here. It looks like the other H1 does because in my style sheet, I'm saying all of my H1s are going to have this styling applied to them. This is called an element selector. There's nothing in front of it. If I want to be a bit more specific and only apply styling to certain elements, what I can do is I can give them a class. The class is another attribute that we use a lot. And I can say that I want my, let's give it to the next one here. Let's give it to this paragraph, right? I want this paragraph to have a class of first long text. So I have this first long text class, and what I'm going to use is a little dot selector so that I can say first long text. Again, curly brackets, opening and closing. And now let's try to apply some styling to this. I'm going to add a little border of 2 pixel, one's enough, 1 pixel solid black around my text. And now whichever paragraph has this class is gonna get that styling. So I could say class and give this to my second paragraph, and then it's also gonna get this styling. This is called a class selector. Another selector that I can use is the hashtag symbol, which I could use for my second hello. So I have my second hello down here, which is this one. And what I can give this element is an ID. It's not a class, right? A class is more something that the idea is that you might want to give it to different elements. Like all of these paragraphs are going to be of this type. The idea is a bit more specific and unique, and you probably usually want to have only one element with a certain ID. And in this case, this could be our second hello. That we named it? Yeah, second hello element. And we might want this to have a color of this brown looks super pretty. Yes. So we can have styling applied to all elements of a certain type, to all elements with a class, or to all elements with a certain ID. The way that these work versus each other is that again, the inline styling here is always going to be strongest. And then we're going to move by order of specificity. So whichever one of these is more specific, like more on point, is going to take precedent over the others. And that works by going this way. The ID one is going to have the highest priority. And then this one is going to have the second highest. And the element selector that applies to all of the H1s or all of the P tags or all of the diffs is going to have the lowest priority because it's very general, right? It goes for everyone. So let's say lowest prio. Again, if you add important to any one of these rules, it's going to jump up in the ranking and win against everything else that you did so far. Let's see how we can make our page a little bit prettier after I've talked about links. Let's add an A tag first. So what we have currently is we have our text, and then we have some headings, and we have the image. And I might want to be able to jump to different parts of my website, or I might want to jump to other websites from here, right? So let's say I have my Nick Cage Wikipedia. So if we're on theme, let's just stay here. I'm a big fan of this actor, right? I want to be able to provide some further information for very interested people. And what I could do is I could have a little A tag that says, instead of, I'm going to comment this out. Commenting, very cool part of coding. So I have this little shortcut. There is something here called toggle line comment. So if you don't want to have to always look for this here, you can use the shortcut, because commenting is something we do a lot. And what that's going to do is it's going to turn off this line of code. So as you can see in HTML, the way that we comment something out is by having this opening tag, the exclamation mark, dash dash, and then we have to also close this. If I don't close this, this comment just goes on and on and on and on, right? And everything afterwards is commented. So let's make sure that I close this. And what that's going to do is it's going to make this invisible to the browser, where it's not going to display it. And one thing that you can do with this is you can turn something on and off while you're developing, right? You might want to see what your web page looks like without this element. And another thing that you can use it for is to leave comments for yourself or your fellow coders and say, this is the top part of the website, right? So that if you come back to your project, maybe a few weeks later, you're gonna be like, wait, what is all of this? Or if you read someone else's code, they might be nice enough to leave some comments, some little tips, some little hints for you to better orientate yourself around the project. All right, so my H1 is commented out, and what we were doing is we were adding a link. So let's change this lorem ipsum here to, let's add a new one. I'm going to use a button, which a button already comes with some, we don't need to use a button. We can just use the A tag directly and say, let's have it be a paragraph that says, if you want some more info, click here. And what we can do in here is we can turn the here into something that we can click so that it will take us away from here. And what we can use for this is the so-called A tag. It's short for anchor tag because it anchors, other paths to our website. So we have this here, and let's see if we can see it already. No, the here doesn't take us anywhere. Let's give it an href, which stands for hyperreference, which is where it's going to take us. And what that does is automatically our browser is going to display this as a link. If I click on this right now, what it does is, because we don't have an href, is it just takes me back to our page, our current page. If I say google.com and I click on this, oh, I need an HTTPS. See. Awesome. So I remember when I did this for the first time when I'm starting to train HTML, this feels pretty cool, right? So we have this little website that we're making ourselves here. It looks a little bit sketchy, but the fact that I can jump from here to actual websites, to me, that's pretty cool, right? And this is what we can do if we add a live web page. It's going to make a bit more sense if we add this Wikipedia page. And now we can click here to jump to this Wikipedia page. As you can see right now, what it does is we leave our web page inside of our tab and we move to the Wikipedia page. We might want people to come back to our website, and to make it a little bit easier for them to come back to our website, what we can do is we can add a little attribute here called blank. Let's try this. Blank. What was it? True? Let's try. All right. It's happening. I'm always looking forward to this first part. So this is the first time during our workshop where I don't remember exactly if it's blank or underscore blank, or how I need to word this exactly. And I like if this happens live with audience, because it will show you that not everyone knows everything, right? And you're not supposed to when you're coding. So don't feel bad if something like this happens. You're not supposed to memorize all these things. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to get a feeling and kind of learn what possibilities there are, what options are out there, maybe which ones make more sense in a certain context. But you don't have to memorize everything by heart. It's more important that it's kind of like a doctor, right? They're never going to know everything. The idea is that they know where they can get reliable information. And one way that you can get this is blank href a tag by Googling for it. And one that you're going to end up with is the MDN docs or W3 schools, are two very often used documentations. And what I can look for is, all right, it's a target, and then my target is supposed to be blank. I love when this happens because you can tell that looking for information is a very important skill of a developer, and you shouldn't ever feel bad for it. So blank. Let's go back and try again. You'll see what our expected behavior is. Yes. So our expected behavior is that when I now click on this tag, it is going to take the user there, but it's doing it in a new tab, right? So our website is still open in the old tab, and customers might be more inclined to come back to our website when it's still open. So target blank, very handy. Also, you see that the browser gives some default styling to our link. I might not be a fan. This is a little bit old school, maybe, right? For those of you that are a little bit older, you might remembering browsing the web and everything being underlined in blue or purple. I might not like the look of this. So what I can do is I can change the styling of my A tags. And what I could do is give this A tag a class that says maybe text A tag, or I can be very general and style all of my A tags the same way. And I can say that I don't want them to be blue. I might want them to be, let's keep the blue, but I might want to not have it be underlined, and that should be text decoration. None. Awesome. So our text decoration is gone. It's still a link. You can see when I hover it, it has it's called cursor pointer already because it's an A tag, and we can still use it without the underline. Let's add a dot after this one. If I want to add a dot, I want to be making sure that I'm inside of my P tag, right? Where the text is, but outside of the A tag, which is where the link is. So I want to add it here. Or if you don't like having an entire line dedicated to this one period, you can add it here as well. And we're going to have, if you want some more info, click here. So let us talk about positioning things. Right now, what we have is we have this, well, what's starting to look like content for our website, but it's all very top to bottom. It still looks very 90s, early 2000s to us, right? Because everything that we're adding is just starting at the top and then slowly moving down, and that's where we end up. So let's see how we can position things on our website. What we can do is we can create certain containers that we can put content in, and then we can tell those containers, the parents, where things inside of them should be and how they should be positioned. Let's talk about the box model before we get to having everything positioned on our page. So this is a visual representation of the box model. So this is the concept of how things are positioned relative to their siblings and to their parents. And the developer tools are very nice to give us this little visual representation so that for each element, so if I look at my hello world here, I can see what size it itself has. In this case, the size of the element is being calculated from its font size. So if I make the font size bigger or smaller, this size is going to change. And then we have a padding, which is how much space it's going to have between the content and the border of the element. How much padding, right? Padding is like a protection around it. Then we have the actual border around it. Here you can see one. And outside of the border, we have the margin, which is the margin is kind of like the leave me alone, I need some space, which the element is telling its siblings like, okay, this is like, I need like this much space around myself. And the size of the element plus its padding, plus the thickness of the border, plus the margin are going to decide where it's going to end up in its positioning. Let's see if we can't have a little header. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change my HTML is awesome to yeah, we can add a little header above this. So the header is what's at the top of a website, and you could just use a div for this. Header is a bit cleaner because then everyone knows, okay, this is like the top part of our website. We could have a little header here that has some information like home page. This could be a button. I'm just showing you some different elements that there are. So we have a button, and this one doesn't exist. Let's go call it home. And then we might have another button that says shop. All right, so these are our buttons. They're inside of our header. And we might have another one that says more info or Wikipedia. Okay, so we have these buttons up here. Our browser already seems to give them some form of styling. We can change that styling a bit more by saying we want our header dot button to look a certain way. Let's see if we can. I like using a background color to just see if I'm targeting the right elements. See how this works without it. Yes. So with this selector, it's very Visual Studio Code is so helpful. It's telling us that we're targeting all of the buttons inside of our header. So we're targeting all the buttons inside of our header, and what we want to do is we want to use the cadet blue again, have a little bit of corporate design. Okay, I can't really read what's on there, so let's change the color, which is the text color, to white. Okay, and I don't like that they are super edgy, so let's have a little Around it is border radius of maybe 5 pixels. Okay, they already look a bit prettier. They're a little bit crammed. So if we go back to our box model, remember we have, where do we have it? Style, computed here. So we have the padding, which is the part around the element. Let's inspect the button. The padding is currently 6 on the sides and 1 at the top. So this is the default padding that the browser gives any button. But we want to have a bit more control over this. So padding, let's give it a padding of 10 pixels. That a bit much? Yeah, that's fine. And we want it to have a font size of 16. Yes. All right. So we give it a padding. It has a certain size. Let's say we want all of these buttons to have the same width. We could give it a width of maybe 200. That's a bit much. Let's say 120 pixels. Okay, so they're all the same size. They all have the same padding. And then the border is currently, I'm not giving it any border, right? If you remember correctly, there's no border styling for my buttons. This is the browser already doing it for me. So if I want to have control over this, I can say I want the border to be 2 pixels, black, solid, or you could use dotted, for example. And it's going to be these little dots, not super pretty. So let's stick with solid. And on top of the border, which is currently 2, I'm going to add some margin so that all of our buttons margin are going to have a little bit of space in between them. So this should be, let's say 20 pixel. That's a bit much. Let's give it 10 pixels. Now, what this does is that each button, there we go. You can see this, it's very beautiful. So the blue is the size of the button. The green is the padding that I gave it. Then we have the border, which is slightly yellow. And then you can see the margin around the element to show us how much space it wants to have versus its siblings. And that's how we can position the element with the box model. Now, another thing that we can do is we can use the parent of these elements to decide where we want to position them. And by the way, I'm not a big fan of this cursor, right? Here we have this kind of cool pointer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the cursor to pointer. And then we have this little hand as soon as I hover over these. If I want to specifically, by the way, change something about what this looks like when I hover it, I can use the hover pseudo selector, which would be header button and then hover. It's hand hover. No, hover. There we go. And now I can say that whenever I hover one of these, I want the background color to be not cadet blue, but okay, Alice blue, is that a thing? All right. So whenever I hover one of them now, this styling is being applied to it. Also, these have a little higher specificity over the ones without it so that they take precedent over it. So what I can do is hover and it will change the color. The Alice blue is a bit of a weird choice, right? Because it's just completely switching the color. I can have a quick word about how these colors work. So what I did until now is I simply used words, right? The most simple ones you're gonna figure out yourself. It's gonna be red, green, blue, even like gold. There's some silver or amber. So with autocomplete, you get some very nice suggestions on what you can use. But the text-based colors are not the only thing that we can use. What we can say is RGB. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow us to very precisely change the colors. Let's try to make it purple, for example. If we want it to be purple, we would add this to 255, crank up the red and crank up the blue, and give it no green at all. And this is kind of a magenta look, right? Some green might be nice, so let's put 100 there. Okay. So we can very much fine tune the colors. This doesn't look like very much, but if you think about it, because we can fine tune all of them for 256 different options from 0 to 255, that gives us 256 raised to the third, which is quite a lot of options for different colors. And what I was going to do, you can also use hex codes, by the way. If we hover this, you can go to any website out there and just generate color hex RGB. I think Google even has one. Yeah, it's very nice. So if we want to have the color that I just created, 255, 100, 255. This is gonna give us the hex code for it, which is just a hexadecimal way of writing the R value, the G value, and the B value. We can copy this, and instead of typing red, green, or blue, we can just add this hex code, and we're gonna have the same color here. There we go. Let's go back to our RGB. Because the cool thing, what we can do is I can take cadet blue RGB.
Hey, Manuel, I think we're
Yes.
going to be cutting in a few minutes.
Yes.
So maybe if you want to make some closing with maybe flex.
I'll make some positioning. Yes. Let's okay, let's stick with my pink. But like I said, you can look things up here. What I can do is, if I want this to look different when I hover, is I can use RGB and then add a fourth number, which is, for example, 0.5, which is the alpha. And what it's going to do is it's going to make this lighter. Okay, there you go. So let's see how I can position my buttons inside of my header. One way that I can do it is right here in my header, right? I want to style my header. So let's say header. And then what I can do is I can say that it should have a display of flex. And flex is one of the major ways that we can use to align items automatically inside of a container. And if I tell it to have flex, I can say that it should have a certain flex direction. The default one that it has right now is row, which makes that all the elements being in a row. What I can do is I can say that they should be in a column, which changes it to being in a column like this. Let me give the header a little border of 1px solid black. Okay, so now we can see where the header itself really is, and we can see how it positions its elements either in a column or in a row. And we might have this right here, and then you might also have multiple of these divs inside of each other to have things be in a column and then also be in a row, right? Another way that we can let's see. Yeah, okay, so we can do that. If we use flex to position things, what we can do is we can use the justify content and the align items to position elements vertically and horizontally within the parent. So if we're telling the parent to have a height of 300 pixels and a width of 500 pixels. So this is now hard-coded. What we can do is we can say that we want elements to align in the center, for example, and we want them to be justified in the center as well. Now they're going to be center aligned, or you might want them to be at the top. So we can use start and be aware that the justify content and the align items, they switch which one moves it vertically or horizontally, depending on whether you're using column or row for your flex direction. Another way that you can position your elements, let's say that we have some more buttons. Another way that you can position them is by giving your element the class, the styling of display grid. And what you can do with the grid is you can play with it quite a bit, where you decide we don't need the flex connect direction anymore, and we don't need these anymore. But what you can do with a grid is you can grid template columns. You can tell it how many columns it's supposed to have. Let's say it's supposed to have 3 columns. Or you can have it be 1 FR. So I'm saying that it should have 1 column that is half the element, or however much space it gets, and then another one that is 1 FR. This one tells him that I can have 3 of them, or I can say that I want 1 column that is 50% of our grid, of the entire element, and then I want one that is 25%, and another one that is 25%. So this one takes up half the element, and then we have the 225 and the 25 ones. We can combine the 2 of them to say, okay, we want one of them to be 50, and then we want another one that is 1 FR and 1 FR, which means they're going to just take up as much place as they are given. What we can also do is we can change where exactly we want certain buttons to be positioned, like where we want them to start, by giving these some grid styles as well. But the grid and the Flexbox are quite dynamic, and they can take away some positioning and make it a bit easier for you to have it be positioned automatically. Before I have to do the closing remarks, let me do one little thing. Especially with Flexboxes and grids, what is being done a lot is that you have different design and different layout for your website, depending if you're on a desktop computer or a tablet or a mobile phone. Sometimes even whether it's a small or large mobile phone. And what you can use is you can use certain media queries. At media. And what we can do is we can say where the screen should have a certain size, and then this will only be applied let's see, only screen, and yes, let's take this and apply it and say we want something to be done only when the screen has a certain width. And what we might want to do is we might want to have a display grid once we're on a mobile phone, and as soon as we're on a desktop, we might want this one to be a little bit different. And as soon as it's a desktop, we might want to have a flex. So let's see if we can do this. As long as we are, the max width. Okay, let's change this to min width, so that if we're on a phone, we have a display grid. And now as soon as I cross the 600, we're going to have a display flex. So you can use media queries to have different styling. You can change all the styling that you want, depending on the size of your viewport of your website. A common approach is that you want to style and program the mobile version of your website first, because it tends to be a little bit easier to make things larger than it is to make them small again, right? So there's this approach called mobile first, where we try to do this one first, the small one, and then eventually we want to make it bigger. Awesome. Thank you, Ruben. Let's see where I have the chat. Is there any unanswered questions inside of the chat, or is there anything someone wants to tell me or ask me?
Well, I was taking care of the chat, but maybe
Awesome. Thank you.
can give the I can open the chat if someone needs to say
Yes.
something.
People look pretty satisfied. The media. So the media queries, there's is a way that what you can also do is you can link an entirely different style sheet, where we have one style sheet, and then you link an entirely different one where you have all of your mobile styling or all of your desktop styling. The idea of media queries in general is the fact that you have different styling applying depending on the size of your viewport. So what you can do is, when you use the developer tools, there's this cool feature where you can click on this icon, and what it will allow you to do is you can see what your website will look like on different devices. So you can see if I have a iPad Pro, for example, what is it going to look like? Okay, it's going to look like this. If I open it on an iPhone SE, it's going to look like this. So you can see how your website looks on different devices. And in order to satisfy the needs for all these different platforms, what you can do is you can use media queries and then apply different styling to it. And here I'm saying only the ones that have more than 600 pixels width. So this one has 375. Only the ones that are above 600 should have these styles applied to them. An easy way that I can use to change it, to display it, is that I can give this, what is it? My first long text, okay? So wherever I style my first long text, I can steal this, put it inside of my media query, and say the first long text should have a background color of coral. Sounds pretty good. And then we can play a bit with the size of this. So if I look at this on a small screen like this, it's gonna have the normal styling. And as soon as I have a large screen, it's gonna change how it looks. Does that answer your question? If you want two different elements side by side, like two paragraphs, you could use either a grid or a flex. Yeah, you're gonna get the code, but let's say I have my first long I'm also a paragraph and then the second one. And what you can do if you want both of them to be next to each other, let's have this one be a p tag as well. So what you would do if you want those two p tags to be next to each other is you would give them a common parent, right? You want to create a common denominator for both of them. And you want to make sure that they're both inside of this parent. And then you can decide how the parent positions its things. So the 2p div, it's not great naming, but it will work. It's the 2p div. And what I'm going to say is it's going to get display flex and then flex direction row, which will position it next to each other. And there we have our two elements. I'm also a paragraph. They're not super pretty right now, but I can say that I want the 2 paragraphs so that you can see it a little bit better. I can give the 2 paragraphs, so the children of this parent, I can give them a border of 1 px solid black, and I can give them a padding of 10 pixels. Yes. I hope that answers your question for positioning 2 paragraphs next to each other. Ooh, flex over grid. I don't think we have enough time for this. It's almost going to get political if we start talking about this. They both have advantages and disadvantages. You can achieve very similar results with using both. Some of it is maybe preference, and the other thing that you can say is if you have things that are more like just in rather static columns or rows, flex might be a bit better. If you're hearing grid, you might already envision, right, this kind of grid, like a bunch of rows, a bunch of columns, and then maybe having them automatically shift, like how many items are on each column or row. Then the grid makes more sense, right? If you have a menu, like for example, if you envision the home screen on your iPhone, for example, how the apps are structured, this is a very grid-like structure, right? It's if you remove one of them, they're all going to shift by one, and it's going to look a bit different. And a flex is more for having columns and rows, right? Experiment with it, and you're gonna feel the difference. Well, thank you, Tedios.
All right, everyone. So, I mean, we would like to be here for hours, you know, like
yes.
when we teach these topics, it's just a never-ending things to show. That's how we're passionate about it. We're happy, and I hope that you could see, you know, how the project starts. Right, there are a lot of concepts that you need to practice, and repetition is key. And if this spark a little bit of curiosity of how to go forward and go more and deeper into these topics, definitely reach out to us. We will be happy to guide you through as well. We might be also be part of the hackathon at the end. We might also be we can meet there as well. So I think yeah, we don't want to take more time from you. I think it's a little late maybe, but I mean, I hope that you enjoy it. Please, you will get an email from me with the recording. Okay,